Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for tuning in. Welcome. John Kelly, profiler, here with the STALK team. The STALK team welcomes you. STALK Incorporated, System to Apprehend Lethal Killers Incorporated. Something I want to put out there that everybody's innocent to proven guilty in the court of law. Today, I'm just really thrilled to be joined by Dr. Edward Mirsky, great psychologist. He is a doctor of psychology. And I'm also honored to be with my team member, Vice President of STALK Incorporated, retired Commander in Chief of Detectives, Frank Adamson. He spearheaded the Green River Task Force. They did a terrific job. Again, Frank, way to go. You got the Gary Ridgway in the end, the Green River Killer. So that's where we're at today. And today we're going to be focusing on the killer of Libby German and Abby Williams. And today we're focusing on profiling a sadistic killer. We're looking at a sadistic killer that we are going to be profiling today. With that being said, let me start with you, Dr. Mirsky, because one thing you left me with the last time we went over this case as a team is that you felt that this killer was extremely sadistic because of him marching these girls a half a mile, three quarters of a mile from his abduction point. Where he abducted them to where he killed them was, half mile to three quarters of a mile. Talk about why you think he's a sadist. Why is he so sadistic?
Well, just because of the distance from, I guess, initially talking to them and I guess somehow getting them to go with him, either probably with a knife or a gun. We're not totally sure which, but um, for him to march them that distance, it's quite unusual, and we've done hundreds of cases, and I can't think of too many where it's you know done this way. Um, so all that distance, what's going on in the perpetrator's mind, what's going on in the victim's mind, um, quite extraordinary, as these cases go. Um, but you could almost, if you want to get a peek into his mind, it had to be pretty sadistic to take two young girls and march them, for said half a mile, three quarters of a mile, and then eventually, you know, kill them. That would take some degree of a sadistic mind to do that, because certainly at any time you could have changed your mind and uh, thought about it and just left them. But he went all the way, obviously, and probably that's most likely was the intention.
Frank, when you look at this and you see this, I mean, I'm looking at it as these girls being terrified to the point of it being like torture for them, being led away, not knowing where they're going, by some nut brandishing a weapon, okay, and probably thinking they're marching away to their death. I mean, I'm sure they don't feel wherever he's taking them is going to be a good place. How do you see it?
I think these two young girls were frightened, just scared to death, and he could be taking them away for a sexual reason, or in fact to murder them. I don't think they know that, but I do think that they're absolutely um, frightened at this point in time.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, what's he taking me away for? Is he taking me away for a sexual reason? Is he taking me away to murder me, or is he taking me away for both? So now, we want to profile this nut butt, and we believe he's a sadistic killer. And with that being said, before we start the profile, we need to let everyone know, which they pretty much know already, that law enforcement has not given out any information at all, pretty much on this case as far as motive or as far as the means of death for these two beautiful girls is a very, very sad situation. They were murdered. I do not blame law enforcement whatsoever. I think they have absolutely every right to keep their cards close to their vest, because the bottom line is that they're responsible for catching this guy, not us. We're trying to help. But I really believe it's going to be the viewers, it's going to be the audience, the tips that are coming in, which probably have this guy pretty much corralled already. But that's how law enforcement's going to grab this guy, and then they're going to have all this evidence that they're going to come out with, and they'll be able to get him. But we have to look at and walk away from this knowing that we've done the best we can do. So we're taking our best shot kind of in the blind at profiling through cases we've worked and looking at it through a behavioral kind of profile. I mean, pretty much what we're doing is we're dissecting this guy's brain. Okay, we're going into his mind, and we're trying to pull his mind apart, and we're trying to profile him and his personality without having a lot to look at. And we've done it before a couple times, so hopefully we'll give it our best shot now, and God's with us, and we'll see what happens. What we're talking about here is, Frank, you have him as being a white male, 5'8" to 5'10", 200 pounds. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, where it gets a little strange for us is with the organization. Is he an organized killer? Is he a structured killer? Because, through our sessions, we've seen organization, and then we've seen a situation where it looks like where he's disorganized. But, we've come to the conclusion that he's organized as well. So we have a white male, 5'8" to 5'10", 200 pounds. That's pretty organized. What does that mean when we say organized, Frank? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. What we mean by organized is he's got this thing planned. He knows what he's doing. He's outside. He's unlikely to be caught. If you observed him walking across that bridge, he was looking behind him at times to see if anyone was around. He takes the victims off the path, out of sight of other people. So he's planned this. He's gone into great detail. He's got some kind of weapon to control them. So we know at least up to the point that he kills them, this whole scene is controlled.
Yeah, the scene is controlled. He's in control. As you say, he's taking them out of sight, which was interesting to me how we knew how to get them below the tree line so nobody could see. I mean, nobody could see that particular area and where he was from any direction, that he was pretty much confident, that he had them in his control and kill zone, and nobody was going to be able to see. I mean, they weren't going to be able to see from the bridge. They weren't going to be able to see from the other trails. He had them where he wanted them, at the time he wanted them. So that's why and I think we all agree on this, that he had to be extremely familiar with that particular area, and was very confident that he was not going to be caught. And you're right, he wasn't caught. Not then, but it's coming. It's coming. Let today be the day. He's going. This guy got to go. He's got to go pretty soon, and he will. Okay. We talked about earlier, Frank, you brought up his need to control. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because, Carter brought that out when he was doing the presser. He was talking about that one of this guy's major issues was for control. He needed to control. So, would you like to, you know, talk a little bit more about that? Because I know we've seen many of these serial killers. That's a need that they definitely have. Would you like to say anything on that?
Yeah, the fact that the girls had a video of him, and when you observe what he did and how he controlled them, and I mean, he had obviously a weapon, and so when he told them to get down that hill, they did it. There's no question. I mean, there was no struggle, anything. You could see that this guy was in charge of the two victims at this point in time. And control is often a major fact in at least serial killings. Um, and it's, you just could see that by the way this particular person operated, that he was that he needed to control his environment.
Something else we've talked about that, this nutbutt isn't, the average, typical social person. Um, and, Dr. Eddy, I think you might want to talk about that a little bit. I mean, we talked about other people may, feel he's kind of weird or odd, and they may alienate him, they may want to stay away from him, but he comes across in some way as weird to others, not the typical social person. Do you want to talk about that, Dr. Eddy?
Sure. Yeah. It just seems this case, many other cases where they're, um, like I said, they can function in society. They can hold jobs, blue collar, sometimes even white collar. Um, but they're usually viewed by others as being a little odd, strange, weird. Um, some of the things they say don't quite match. We're not talking about like psychotic here, like schizophrenia or any bipolar disorder. Dude, it's just their personality is just somehow off. Uh, if you want a psychiatric label, sometimes we call them like schizoid personality disorders. Um, so they don't easily blend in. They usually have um, you know problems making relationships, keeping relationships. They can have relationships with family members and maybe um, said even some coworkers, but even the coworkers probably view them as somewhat strange and odd. Um, but interesting, I guess this is where they maybe try to compensate in some way by taking control. But they think they have some insight into the fact that they're strange and odd. They're intelligent. They're not, below average intelligence. So they have some degree of insight, but it's almost like baked in the DNA. They're just strange, odd people. But yet, when it comes to, I said in this case, taking control and um, wanting to be dominant, a top dog, that this is their opportunity to do that. Where in many social situations, they're kind of in the background or very reserved. Um, so it's almost like they're acting out, and they can do it in a very pathological way.
Uh, when you look at these kinds of people, I mean, they're structured, they're organized, but like you're saying, it's all part of this control because they're knowing that they're not a social butterfly, and they know it's hard for them to adapt with other people, or they have certain social issues. Now something else we've been kind of holding back on that we haven't been adding into any of the profiles that we've put out already is, primary intake sense. We have an organized, structured, controlling kind of person. But what is his primary intake sense? Okay, so we know there are three primary intake senses. We know there's usually visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. I mean, there's three primary intake senses. Kinesthetic being feelings, having feelings, right? Well, with these types of guys, usually we can eliminate the kinesthetic intake sense, the feelings intake sense, because they don't usually have any, remorse or guilt. They don't have a whole lot of feelings really for anybody really. Maybe their children or whatever, family members, they have some, but really they walk around not caring a whole lot about how other people feel, or how animals feel. That's why there's a lot of them start off slaughtering, torturing animals. There's a lot of animal cruelty in a lot of these guys' backgrounds to begin with. And something we talked about, that this guy is probably some type of hunter, and is probably knows how to slaughter animals as well. Okay, but getting back to his primary intake sense, I truly believe his primary intake sense is visual, because if you take away the kinesthetic, the feeling intake sense, you're left with visual or auditory, right? Now, this guy is a man of very few words. Okay. Guys, down the hill. Guys, down the hill. All right. Now, those are the only sound bites that we've heard. And supposedly, he has grabbed these girls at the abduction point, and then he has walked them approximately half a mile to three-quarters of a mile away. And we haven't heard any more of his voice. Okay. Now, I would have to believe that law enforcement definitely has more auditory information. However, I believe if they had more sound bites on him particularly, they would have released those along with the sound bites of guys down the hill. Because the more sound bites of him, his voice, that they could put out there, the better shot they have of somebody recognizing his voice. So, why I think he's not auditory is because he is a man, again, of few words. Guys down the hill. He's not a talker. He's, like we said earlier, he's not a social butterfly. Okay. He's not going to be a commentator on the news next week, and he's going to be yakking it up all over the place. This guy's very visually oriented. So we remove visual, or I'm sorry, we remove auditory intake sense, we remove kinesthetic intake sense. We have a very visual predator here who was able to scope out the area, scope out his victims, follow them, get them in, see them go into his control zone, make sure he wasn't seen by anybody else. He was able to do the deed. He was able to kill these poor girls, whatever else he did to them, and he was able to get away supposedly unseen. Only thank God again for Libby and her camera and getting him, on film, on camera, And that's how this guy is going to get brought down. He's going to get brought down by people's tips, and he's going to be brought down most definitely by a little girl from her grave. Okay. What do you guys see as far as him being visually oriented? Do we have any disagreements on that, or anything you guys like to add?
I agree that I think he is visual. I think he's basically an insignificant person that has no moral sense and victimizes these young girls because it makes him feel powerful. And it's almost like a drug um, for this type of individual. And he's just a nobody.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I would say, yeah, he operates very visually. He said he's a man that probably doesn't have great language skills. There's probably some deficits there, so he's a man that just doesn't communicate a lot. But his language skills, I said, probably are somewhat deficient, communication skills, but which you can say with his visual intake sense, that's how he operates in the world at his optimal level is through the visual sense.
Yeah, he navigates the world visually most of the time. All right, getting back to our visual predator here. And, something you brought up earlier too, Frank, I think it was really important earlier in our meetings was that, even though this guy's organized, even though he's visual, even though, he was there, to abduct a girl that day, a female that day, and whether, just randomly Libby and Abby were there or not. That's one piece of it. But something you brought up, and certainly, we have to keep it in mind. We can't dismiss it. Is that maybe he, in some way, had stalked these girls prior to that day, and this wasn't random. He knew that these girls were going to be there that day, and they were going to be going to that bridge. Now, we don't know for sure. What we do know for sure, he was there to sadistically hurt somebody and kill them. But we don't know if he had prior knowledge of those two girls specifically being there that day. So do you have any more you'd like to talk about on that?
Yeah, it definitely appears that this wasn't a random act on the killer's part. It seems pretty obvious that he had some foreknowledge that these young girls were going to be on that trail on that particular day, and and he was equipped for it. He could have run into other people, but he didn't. And to me, if it were random, we would probably see some like murders close by. But we don't see that in this particular case. So I think when you look at all the circumstances, you have to say this guy probably stalked these kids in some way prior to this particular meeting.
Yeah, he's some kind of connection somehow, somewhere, some way, or else he just got really, really lucky. And it does happen. I mean, your odds of hitting the lottery are really, really horrible, but people do win. People do hit the lottery all the time. So, and it goes against the odds, but it happens. What say you, Dr. Eddie?
Yeah, it certainly seems like say he either got very, very lucky or he had some kind of prior knowledge. Um, how that happened, that's a real interesting issue, I guess. How did he have that? Was he stalking one or the other girls before, right? For maybe days, weeks, months? Or did he have access to their, social media somehow? That's the other way. That's an interesting angle to look at. I assume the police have looked at that, and maybe there's a dead end, or maybe they do have some information. It's almost, I guess, reverse tracking in a way. Can they go back and look at who has access to their social media outlets? Um, but I would agree that that it was somehow he seemed to realize that they were going to be there, and maybe not both, but certainly one. We don't know which one, but maybe one of them he was planning on doing what he did. So,
And unfortunately and sadly, he looked at the other one as just being collateral damage. That's
could
sad.
be,
That's
could be.
pretty damn sad. When we talk about primary visual intake sense, you know, people with primary visual intake senses like to do visual things. And, in our years, we've come across and landed on people, landed on some of these guys. A couple of them are away now. They're not getting out. But I mean, no, they seem visual. People like to do visual things. I mean, they seem to be into photography. They enjoy photography. Really can get into cameras. Um, Gosh, so many of them are into art. They love art. Some are into drawing. Reading is something they're very much interested in. I mean, it's amazing when we've seen these visual people, in prison, and all of a sudden, they become Picassos, with their art and their drawings and everything. I mean, it's just like something I could never comprehend. I mean, being me, I'm not a visual person like that, but just amazing how that visual gift or intake sense, whatever you want to call it, that they have really becomes expressed when they're in cages. When they're away, and all of a sudden they want to put it up for sale, and they're doing this and they're right that, and we got Gacy painting this, and we've got all these other guys painting a whole bunch of things and making things. I don't want to mention names, but that's what visual people with visual primary intake sense do. They enjoy doing visual things. They like sightseeing. They like looking. They like hunting. Some who are hunters like hunting, but they're very interested in doing visual things. Is there anything I'm missing? I mean, talking about visual activities for visual people. I'm not sure there's a whole host, but I mean, even the guy in Las Vegas that committed the major mass murder up there. I mean, I think killed 50 some people. When we looked at him, we knew he was visual. I mean, this guy was an accountant. This guy's an accountant. I mean, you're not going to be an auditory guy if you're an accountant. I mean, you're visual, you're focused, you're looking at figures on. Am I missing anything? Am I missing anything? There we go. That's not Lulu, right? Lulu the cat. That's not Lulu the cat. All right.
As
So
a an extension of this, I would say it wouldn't be shocking that when the perp is caught, that he may have even taken pictures
That's right.
of his work, to obviously remember, and they get the picture and they get, sexually stimulated. That's why many perps we know take trophies, small ones. Could be underwear, could be, a necklace, driver's license, something. But they periodically go back and look at them and, have sexual fantasies and sexual thoughts, even, sexual activities. So when the perp is caught, I wouldn't be surprised if they find them. They usually are well hidden, and they don't keep them like on the desk, in their on their kitchen table. But um, yeah, so that would be more evidence of his primary intake sense being visual. Um, we got to catch him first to see if that's true.
Frank, any more on that?
Oh, I basically believe that this person was a hunter and stalker, and those are visual um, uh,
Dynamics, traits,
yeah.
whatever you
I
want to
mean,
call
it demonstrates that this person was visual in his intake.
Perfect. When we talk about what does this killer do to make a living, um, this is where this visual intake sense comes in. A couple of the people we've landed on, one was a contractor, he was a carpenter, he was into carpentry work. Another one was a landscaper. He did landscaping. These are very hands-on and visual, blue-collar kinds of jobs. Usually these are, like you said, Eddie, blue collar kinds of jobs. Truck driving, you gotta be pretty visual to be a good truck driver, especially on the highways today. You got to see where you're going. You got to know where you're going. We've seen painting. Gary Ridgway was a painter. He painted trucks. Okay, as you brought out, Frank, earlier. So, these are just some of the kind of jobs that we've been involved with people we've landed on over the years with primary visual intake senses. Now, that's not to say they can't talk. Usually means they don't have a lot of feelings for anybody. Maybe their own, some of their own family members. That's something for another day. Or thinking on that, but really, they don't have a whole lot of empathy for people. I mean, or animals, right? I mean, they just go about trying to get whatever they can get when they want it. They want what they want when they want it, and they want to have control over everything, like Frank and Eddie brought out earlier. Could be a white collar kind of guy. I mean, and we could be wrong here, but we'll see. Time will tell because he's going down, and I know he's going to get caught. Any other jobs come to mind to either one of you guys? I mean, there's 80 million visual jobs out there. I mean, he could be writing books. I mean, I don't know. He could be an author of some sort. Who knows? I mean, but we do believe he, takes pictures. Probably took pictures, like you said, of his victims, and into painting. But anything else you want to add to how he makes a living visually?
Well, I would say it's very difficult to be specific. If you want to,
Yeah, it's so many. There's so
yeah,
many.
you're talking millions of jobs that obviously involve,
Yeah.
you know, at least moderate,
Yeah.
yeah, at least moderate to high amounts of visual acuity. Um, but a specific job, we can say blue collar, but that's, like you said, that's 80 million, 90 million jobs. Um, if there were a slaughterhouse or something right around there, and I don't know if there is.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, okay. that might be something, but if we knew the manner of death, we still don't even know that, I don't think, right? That we're not totally
No,
sure.
we're not. We are not sure on that at all. Law enforcement has not confirmed that.
Yeah, so if that were a matter of death, it was, a knife, both of them, then we could say, well, there's a slaughterhouse, a few miles away or something, maybe, you know, a butcher, butcher shop, something like that. But um, even, well, since like hunting, I don't know about, I guess most people aren't professional hunters, they do it as a hobby, right? As a pastime, they don't have, most of them are professional hunters. But um, other than that, it's awfully difficult. Just look at all the serial killers over that we've studied for many years. Look at their backgrounds, quite diverse. So,
Yeah, and there is a packing place there, pork processing facility there that's been brought up a lot by a YouTuber. I think we've looked at a couple of his YouTubes, Minivan Traveler. He's brought up some of that. I know you don't watch him, Eddie, but it's very astute of you to, focus in on that too, because that's very, very possible because it's a small area. This is, I think, the biggest employer in the town. This meat processing plant. Anything's a possibility. Um, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see. In watching Minivan Traveler about 2 weeks ago, too, last week, he talked about, the Golden State Killer case, which we're very familiar with. We've done profile. We did a partial profile on the Golden State Killer. We worked that case for Dark Minds as well. But some picture taking that goes on with some of these serial killers. And again, it's visually oriented, and with our boy down there, I mean, he ended up being a truck mechanic. But again, if in fact he is the Golden State Killer, I'm not saying Joseph James D'Angelo is the serial killer. He is a suspect. Now that they've arrested for the case, he's innocent until proven guilty. But an isolating kind of job, working in a place, working on trucks, doing his own thing all day mechanically, has very visually hands-on kind of oriented thing. And, I think he was into, some kind of picture taking as well. I believe he was. I wouldn't bet my life on it, but certainly visual people because he was always peeping through the windows, peeping Tom all the way, constantly. I mean, obsessed, constantly looking and looking and looking and looking at people and looking at areas and looking at how to get into houses and watching people come and go and knowing what their timing was. And, so, you know, I think it's not a far stretch to believe that when this guy does get busted, we're going to see a lot of this visual acuity there. Anything else, Frank, you want to add on this? Anything
Yeah.
right now on this? Yeah.
Yes, to me, the question is, what does this guy like to do in his spare time? And I think that he's an outdoor person. I mean, this is a cold time of year. He's out there, and it's just a natural thing for him. He's dressed for the outdoors, and he's definitely um, the kind of person that's going to enjoy the outdoors, is going to enjoy the sights and scenes that he can see in that environment. So I think you have to kind of go back to when you're thinking about, well, what does this guy do as an occupation? I want to know also, what does he do in his spare time?
Excellent point. What is he doing? He's probably an outdoors kind of guy, and he definitely is not scared to get into the thick of it. Really, literally, and go down the hill and down the bushes and trying to, keep two girls controlled at the same time. In winding up here, I want to address the killer. Because I know the killer watches us. I know the killer's watched us. I know he's watching YouTube all the time because this is the only place he can really get information. Okay? There's really nothing or hardly anything in the papers. There's really nothing on national news. It's all political these days. So for him to stay on top of anything, he's got to be on the internet. And on the internet, if he wants anything new or anybody's thoughts or to try to grab any kind of idea at all, how close law enforcement is to him, he's got to be watching YouTubers. Okay. I mean, there's no other way because that's where the information is coming from. There's always consistent information coming from YouTube, and I'm sure he wants to keep up on the news, as is all the predators we have stalked over the years. Okay. So, what I want to say to the killer is, Mr. Killer, you at times, I believe, have tried to play with us. You played with us in a few different ways. Not only are you taking in the information, but we think you've sent some fictitious emails through to try and get information or whatever. What I want to tell you is you're done. Okay. I mean, they're on you. Okay. They're on you and they're watching you. Okay. And you need to notice the best thing you can do is give yourself up. Now you got about this much where you can cut a deal if you want to give yourself up. But you only have about this much left. Okay? Because guess what? You're watching us. Law enforcement's probably watching us. Law enforcement's probably watching all YouTubers. Because they know that's the only place you can get information, so you're probably watching. You get what I'm saying? So I really and truly believe they are on you and would be more than happy to help you give yourself up if you want to do it. You need to turn yourself in. Okay, there's 2 dead girls that we know of. We don't need 3. We've got 2 families suffering immensely. We don't need 3. Okay? Do yourself a favor. Give yourself up. The time is now. Okay, if you want to give yourself up, you do it now. I want to thank you guys so much for the work you've done on this. We've done as best we can do with this partial profile, and we'll see where it takes us. We have we believe is a very sadistic white male, 5'8" to 5'10", weighs approximately 200 pounds. Please let me know if I miss anything. Very well organized and structured. Has a very visual primary intake sense. Would probably be into some kind of hands-on visual type of job, as we've mentioned earlier. Also, what does he do in his fun time? Probably visual things. His primary visual intake sense, he's going to be focused on doing visual things. The other thing we talked about is he's not a typically social person, could be seen as odd or weird. He has a drastic need to control because he has such a low self-esteem, such a low self-worth. Tries to cover that up with his pathological narcissism. So by being the guy, the man in control, probably into hunting, extremely knowledgeable about that particular area, knows it very well. And, I would say he's somewhat of a visual bragger. Let me show you this. Let me show you that. Let me show you what I got over here. Here's a deer I got over there. Here's a fish I caught over here. So I think I think it's safe to say he's that kind of person because the only thing he has going for him is what he can capture, control, and probably kill. That's his claim to fame in a lot of different ways. And again, like I said, could be focused into reading more for whatever reason, and looking at. I believe too, porno. You know, violent porno. I mean, it's all over the internet. Violent porno is. Do you guys agree with that? That'd be something he'd be interested in.
Sure. Yeah. But certainly porno in general, and maybe specifically more sadistic,
So
sadomasochistic
there it is. Yeah.
kind of activities. Yeah.
How about you, Frank?
Yeah, I basically believe that he probably is into pornography.
Well, guys, thank you so much. For making yourselves available today for our audience. Our audience really loves you. We've gotten a lot of subscriptions, we've gotten a lot of comments. I can't thank the audience enough for all their comments, all their participations. Please, if you have any tips and they look like the guy on the bridge in the video, call law enforcement. Just do not take what we say, okay? It should also have something to do with him looking very similar or like that person on the bridge. The law enforcement is saying the person on the bridge guy is the killer, okay? So, our behavioral analysis combined with the video, thank God that Libby took, of the man on the bridge. That's where you need to call law enforcement with the tip. Okay? Call them first. They need your tips. All right? Any tips you send us, they go over to law enforcement. And that's what we've been doing. And with a lot of tips, you're not going to see them in the comments because we don't want the killer to see them in the comments. Because he can look at the comments just as well as anybody else can. So we don't want them to know who you are. We don't want them to know about your comments. So we just send those over to law enforcement and then we file them. Okay. So again, thank you so much for having us in your houses, for looking at us, for all your subscriptions. Have a wonderful weekend. Make it a safe day out there. Stay safe and thank you so much.